Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the afternoon session of this brokerage event. Before we get started with the panel, I have a small housekeeping note. If you have lost anything important, like a little folder with some flight details or a kind of wrist brace, they are at the cloakroom. And if anyone else finds anything that looks important, please hand it into the cloakroom, and anyone else can find it there. Okay, on to the panel. So the reason we have this panel is because, of course, IHI doesn't operate in a vacuum. And if you want to stand out from the competition, you do need to understand the wider environment we operate in. So to help you with that, we've invited some experts to give you some context into things like the EU policies that are relevant for IHI, the industry context, the importance of patient involvement and research, and last but by no means least, the regulatory environment. So I'm just going to briefly present our speakers here. So next to me we have Gianpietro van der Goor, who is Policy Assistant to the People, Health and Society Director at the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. Next we have Magda Klebus, who is Executive Director for Science Policy and Regulatory Affairs at FPA, the Pharmaceutical Industry Association. Then we have Dariusz Adamczewski, who we met briefly this morning, but he is Managing Director of the Children's Tumor Foundation Europe. And last but certainly by no means least, we have Nathalie Seigneret, who is Senior Scientific Project Manager at IHI and our in-house regulatory expert. So in a moment, I will be asking the panelists to give their perspectives on the issues I outlined, but we do have, this is a discussion and we want you to be part of it, so if you want to contribute to the discussions or ask a question, you can do that via Slido. The details are there on the screen, there's the QR code, or if you want to go old school, you can go to the Slido website and enter the hashtag IHI 2025. And if your comment is directed to one of the speakers in particular, please note that in your question as well. And if you're in the room, you'll be able to raise your hand and someone will come to you with a microphone. So, without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Gianpietro from the European Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, and thank you to IHI for inviting me to present a little bit the outline of what we are expecting from this call as a public investor, as a public funder. And can I have the first slide or need I to press? Does it work? No?
Can we have the slides up?
Yes.
There we are.
Oh, that's the... Okay, then the order was different. Okay, yeah, very good. So as a public funder, of course, EU policies are a central point. As you might know, we are very much interested in order to make a difference for people, making a difference for our citizens. But beyond that, you have certainly heard what the agenda is currently, let's say, driving and influencing, and that's very much also, let's say, the developments we see generally on competitiveness. Maybe you have heard about the Draghi report last year, which make a clear point that we need to be better on being competitive in the global scene, but also that we need to make more out of the single market, which was actually highlighted in the so-called letter report. So this is something very important to the Commission, to have not only the citizens in the focus, but also our industrial competitiveness, the functioning of the single market. And with the geopolitical tensions that we see, that of course security and resilience have moved more and more into the spotlight, that is also an important element. And of course healthcare security belongs to that framework. Preparedness is a subject that comes around again and again, not only in the context of infectious diseases preparedness, but also in other contexts of crisis preparedness to safeguard citizens' health and societal stability and so on. And the third element, which was actually something that was already highlighted by or put on the spotlight by the previous Commission, is of course sustainability and green transition. So these are the major three blocks, and I will not now go into the detail of all the EU policies that are shaping that. You are well aware of the general context, but we have specifically looked on the life sciences to spur innovation in the area of let's say, life science-driven sectors. And we have developed a strategy which was published in July this year, which actually takes a cross-cutting, cross-sectoral approach, a One Health approach, looking at the potential of life sciences and life science-based innovation for supporting health and well-being, for supporting the competitiveness of industry, and for supporting and promoting the sustainability of our society and economy. So this is basically what I wanted to showcase in this slide, is basically that we take a cross-sectoral approach, not only on health, but also looking at the other opportunities and needs in the other sectors where life sciences can make a decisive impact. And of course, we do that because life sciences sectors matter to the European Union. They are an important share, important part of let's say, the economic activity, making up to almost 20%, 10% of the GDP, and close to 20% of R&D investment by the private sector is invested in the life sciences sector, in R&D. And it's almost 30 million people or 30 million jobs that are created, so close to 14% of total employment in the EU. So it's really important for us, and an important opportunity for the Union to step up its efforts and actually better exploit the potential and the excellence we have in Europe in driving innovation in the life sciences. We have therefore drawn up an action plan with 27 actions in 11 areas, with 10 areas with 11 flagship actions, and I'm just now focusing on the flagship actions, and I will go through quite quickly. Flagship actions that are focusing, for instance, on clinical research, investment there, the setting up of centers of excellence on ATMP. So you see there is a strong focus in, even if it's cross-sectoral, we see that quite some presence of health developments, also that we take a One Health approach in developing research and innovation agendas. For instance, on climate change and health as well, something that we see as quite, let's say, decisive, that we are better prepared on the changes that climate change will bring to us and the way that we need to adapt to these changes. We have also seen that in the use of data, in the context of the European health data space, for instance, it's important that we step up the dialogue between national authorities in order to make sure that there is a better, let's say, or more coherent and consistent way of interpretation of data legislation. And we are also moving in the context of the Choose Europe initiative that you might have heard. We want to make sure that talents are attracted and kept in Europe. So this is also an important element, I think, for industry, that we can actually attract talent and keep them in Europe, and so underpin the excellence that we have in Europe. Apart from that, we have, of course, some regulatory, let's say, options or issues that we could address, that we are going to address, that has not been dealt with by the Life Science Strategy itself, but there will be the Biotech Act coming out at the end of this year, actually, in December. And there will probably also be a Biotech Act next year, so there will be two acts delivered on the biotechnology aspects of regarding the regulatory environment. I think I will now move to the, let's say, the calls that have been issued and try to link it a bit to what you should consider when responding to the calls. And I will only refer to the Life Science Strategy. Of course, there are interconnections to the overarching issues that I've just mentioned at the beginning, so the competitiveness overall, the security or resilience of Europe, as well as the sustainability. And when I talk about sustainability, then of course understanding determinants of health is an area where the One Health approach and the changes that climate change brings on the health of people, or the challenges that it brings on health systems, are quite relevant. Then we have this area where we talk about the ecosystem approach, the integration of the different actors and challenges. And certainly there, I would highlight the centers of excellence, where we try to establish a network of expertise within Europe on ATMPs, especially to drive and to promote better usage of the excellence that we have in Europe in order to translate quicker and faster the knowledge into innovation. Furthermore, they are, of course, potentially in the area of the biomanufacturing, and we will see certainly also aspects that then will be presented in more clarity in the Biotech Act. On the topics that is more about people-centered innovation, I think it's important to highlight what we have seen as an essential basis in the life science strategy. That actually people are, of course, the center of what we want to deliver. So in the end, it's patients and people that benefit or should benefit from the innovations that are coming out from health technologies, from what has been developed. And of course, they should trust whatever science is delivering, and they should be clearly informed and not misinformed, something that we see more and more as a way to also undermine credibility, or especially also of suspicion with regard to industry, and where we have to counteract and really provide evidence that things are safe and efficient. So this is certainly something where we all have to be work in one direction, to showcase the opportunities, to respond to the needs of citizens, and clearly make the case that investments in innovation is not a risk, but an opportunity for people to stay healthy and become healthier. Now, one aspect that is certainly central to the life science strategy is enabling a better use of data, and basically build on the opportunities that artificial intelligence is offering in speeding up the process of developing innovation, but also in making healthcare systems more effective. So there we will see certainly there are strong links in the life science strategy where we call for that, supporting the European health data space, but also some specific initiatives like the Virtual Human Twins initiative. So this is certainly in this topic important to make the link also to the AI Act and in general to the data governance that applies in Europe on data and the European health data space and AI. Now, regarding the assessment of health technologies, this is also something that is dealt with in the life science strategy, where we actually raised the importance of having, let's say, regulatory sciences and regulatory innovation, and if possible, adaptive frameworks, sandbox approaches, and so on, regulatory sandboxes to help not only the innovators, but especially also the regulators to keep up to the task and be not, let's say, too much, let's say, driven by outdated, let's say, aspects of regulations, but really adapt to the new opportunities and needs, but also the new ways to actually control and ensure safety and efficacy of technologies. So that's something that we regard as key, that we keep up with the innovation, but also not hindering that innovation is basically overregulated or is basically inhibited by too strict views on what regulations actually are imposing. But of course, still keep it safe and efficacious as a central point, of course, not undermining this dimension. So here we are at the last topic. That's from my point, in a nutshell, a little bit how the current calls link to the life science strategy. And the life science strategy is an umbrella strategy, so basically it refers to other activities that are coming up and that will be, let's say, announced in the soon future, like, for instance, the Biotech Act. But we have also other activities that will come up soon. We have a bioeconomy strategy that partially links also to the health sector, and other initiatives that will come up next year. And here I stop, and thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will add as well, I mean, the links between the life sciences strategy and Call 12, they are completely explicit. There is no subtlety. If you read the draft topic text, as Hugh suggested you do earlier today, you will see very clearly marked, this is the link with the life sciences strategy, and this is what we're expecting. So again, if you read the topic text, all the information is there. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Magda Klebers from FBA. Would you like to give the industry perspective on all of these things, please?
Sure, thank you. I don't have slides, so that would probably be a slightly shorter introduction, but maybe first, on Call 12 and the link to the policy, I think it's an important one. It's not just the life science strategy in general, but there is a number of open legislations and legislations in implementation today, like EHDS, etc., that offer a fertile ground for actually creating a policy lab and a test bed for seeing how this works in practice. So what is important is what's written in the topic text and the clear references, but please do also read between the lines of where your project and your idea that you want to put on the table can actually contribute to the broader good. But let me come back to why we are in IHI in the first place. And I think competitiveness was mentioned today so many times. It's not just competitiveness. We are here to, and we are completely aligned on that with the European Commission's strategy to make Europe more competitive and European population healthier. And this combination of these two aspects is what is driving us to be here and to put our capacity, our resources, our brains to collaborate with our stakeholders to deliver tools that do three things: to make companies more competitive, to make sector more competitive, to make Europe healthier and more competitive. And I think that's what you could see in Call 12. I would like to just highlight three aspects. The first one is why industry is getting into these collaborations to de-risk and accelerate technology development and its deployment. It's clear, there is no hidden agenda. We want to be more competitive, we want to use and accelerate technology and medicines and therapies and whatever intervention we want to develop. We want to do it more effectively by working together with our competitors and by working together with the other stakeholders. I think it's important because we sometimes forget about the public-private nature and the needs of both sides, public and private, in those projects. So we go into that because we hope that by engaging better and in a more collaborative way, we are going to both de-risk and accelerate innovation. The second, we want to do this here in Europe, and it's really important. So, and therefore we want to shape the broader ecosystem beyond individual pipelines, beyond individual companies' productivity. We want also to make sure that the learnings from the projects can serve the purpose of de-risking it and accelerating for everybody else. So if I look at clinical trials, for example, if I look at manufacturing, if I look at life cycle management of health products, we hope that with the IHI projects, we are going to help our academic and public health partners to deliver on their objectives, that we are going to help companies to be faster and better in developing and delivering their products, and we hope that these learnings could serve the community, so that we are going to translate what lessons come from projects into policies and into guidance and into rules that would help everybody else to be as effective and as competitive. We have a number of great examples from the past. I can talk about them later in the panel, but just to say that, to mention three examples of where IHI and IMI projects have informed policy, and I think that that's important and maybe could serve as an inspiration of what your projects could achieve beyond just helping a technology to thrive, is, well, three examples. The first one is related to an old project where we were trying in IMI to look at the value of adaptive models for clinical trials and for delivery for HTA. And actually, Adapt Smart had translated into adaptive models pilot in the European Medicines Agency, and later has actually transitioned into Prime. So this is one way of creating a policy lab where you can start something, de-risk it, understand what are the implications for all stakeholders, and that could, in the future, become a policy that would help absolutely everybody in the field. Another example, more recent, that was just launched in one of the previous calls, related to the regulatory sandboxes that you are describing. And while the project is not yet started, the reason why we have launched that call earlier was not only to test what are the values and limitations of regulatory sandboxes, but also to prepare the ground for implementation of a new piece of legislation that is currently in making, not yet adopted, but which has a reference to regulatory sandboxes, and that nobody has applied so far at a large scale in our sector. So it was important that we, rather than running into day one of the legislation and then be blocked because we only need to uncover how to work, we are already testing and trying the limitations of that in order to start from day one. So again, when you think about your projects, is there anything that you can help to unlock today that would become a law, soft law later, and that can help everybody to advance much faster? The last example, and then I'll pass over to other colleagues, is about the data agenda, so important. And I think that, again, the way we can support policy is by providing evidence, by generating data and creating the infrastructures that can help policymakers in doing their job. And I think that Eden, one of these examples, the European Health Data Network, has created that infrastructure, and its principles informed EU Darwin. And today, Eden, as such, is developing a lot of information that helps the regulators, that helps policymakers to make decisions. So it's not just about informing how policy would work, but also generating evidence that policymakers can use to make decisions that are much broader than an individual project or individual product. I think I'll stop here, but I hope our expectations were also made clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magda. Just a reminder, if you have any comments or questions, you can put them on Slido. The hashtag is IHI 2025, and the QR code is there on the screen. Next, I'd like to hand over to Dariusz Adamczewski from the Children's Tumor Foundation Europe, which is a patient organization primarily.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, IHI, for invitation to this great event and very important panel as well. I'd like to address patients' role in the research and innovation agenda. So we can read clearly that every project practically is patient-centered, has to be patient-centered. What does it mean? It means simply that we all need to be a bit selfish, because we are either already are or very soon will be patients. So all efforts, all activities of every stakeholder in the health space is dedicated to patients, and it is addressing patient needs, either met or unmet yet need. However, it's all based on patient needs. How to identify these needs? Only by shifting the agenda, the approach from something that was present in the healthcare and very common in 19th century, early and maybe even late 20th century, so paternalistic research hypothesis-based approach, to lived experience, unmet patient needs agenda that is happening right now, more and more often. As an active clinician as well, I must admit it's not easy always, because we tend to be a little paternalistic, we tend to know better. However, our experience shows that patient knows better usually what patient's needs are. How can we get there? How can we involve patients and make well-informed decisions? Actually, also by educating patients and helping patients' organization to professionalize, and they do it. There are more and more patient organizations that are very professional. They are not only group patients, but they team up with pharma veterans, with clinicians, to really proactively shape the agenda. So including them from the very beginning of even the research hypothesis is key to identify the real patient need. We especially observe this in the rare disease area. Our foundation is active in that patient groups, patient organizations are really driving the research. So organizations are not only being included in the group of different collaborations leading to innovation on driving the research, but they are themselves driving it, funding it, linking all stakeholders in the healthcare space to really achieve what they are looking for, to either find appropriate outcomes or to find therapy for their disease. They are also finding the ways of collaboration across borders. What is very, very important in Europe and what has been mentioned by my colleagues here, so data interoperability, cross-border healthcare delivery, access to patients, access to data necessary to perform research. Patients find the way because they know exactly what's needed. And by this multi-stakeholder collaboration, we can be sure that we are addressing properly patients' needs. And this is what can I all invite you to, and also by, as I mentioned at the beginning, being a little selfish and realizing that all of us are or will be patients.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then for the last opening remarks, I'd like to hand over to Nathalie Seigneuret, who is my colleague at the program office. Nathalie.
Thank you very much. And I will just repeat some of the messages that you have already heard, either from the other panelists or from this morning speech from Niklas and Hugh, that for us in IHI it's very important that our projects are ambitious, transformative, and really look for impact. And this includes the regulatory impact, because ultimately that may benefit for the patients, for the healthcare system, and help as well with the competitiveness that we're talking about. But we know that there are gaps in the research, and that needs to be addressed if we want to improve the development of medicines or medical devices or in vitro diagnostic, or the combination of all that, or other health innovations. And that as well in the decision-making process, including the regulatory decision-making process. And this gap may include tools, methodology, for instance, we have mentioned it already in the clinical trial space, but can be as well in modeling, simulations, biomarkers, etc. So already, maybe you have seen in our topics that we do have some mentions of where could be these gaps. I would refer as well, and there is a link in this slide, to the EMA with the European Medicine Agency, together with the head of Medicine Agency, have produced a regulatory research needs. So basically it's a document that they have worked upon to already identify a number of areas where they think that there is a need for funding going into that research, and this area with real research questions that could be addressed, and especially in the context of collaborative research and public-private partnership. Because IHI, in a way, being this neutral platform, is really a good opportunity to really address some of these aspects and to drive the regulatory science to go forward and to support the evaluation of the European regulatory landscapes in order to help as well to continue promoting the innovation and to be adapted to this evolution that we are going to see with many exciting science. But this science needs to be translated into meaningful outcomes, and if we really want to make sure that the science doesn't stay there, but has really applicability. So this is really something that is important to see, is that we have already some project in this space, but what is important is that many opportunity, and the Call 12 again offer this opportunity to continue to tap in this area where we can help to drive this regulatory science. But of course, it's not a given just to say, well, we will do a good research and then this will be directly accepted by the regulators and therefore will be embedded. There are some not condition, but there are things really to consider from the start in your project if you are wanted to get into that space. Is the fact that, first of all, you need to really understand, well, does my idea really have an impact, or would it be able to be used in the context of the regulatory processes for the medicine development, device development, or being in the regulatory process? And if yes, it's really important to already think from the start in order to make sure that there is a chance that the data generated through the project could be accepted by the regulators and then being actually implemented or being used or being at least tested. So for that, it's important to have that already in mind from the proposal stage, because you may need to understand the landscape where we are working, and especially with the different legislation, which one applies, which are the relevant regulatory authorities that needs to be maybe considered in the context of my research, of the research project. In addition, and this is based on the experience we have seen so far, it's really important from the start to have a regulatory strategy and an interaction plan. Of course, at the proposal level, you won't have the full-fledged strategy, but it's already to have an outline so that it can build on in your project and be an iterative process all along your project lifetime. And for that, it's important to not only understand the regulatory landscape, but to have as well a bit of expertise in the consortium, because obviously it's not necessarily a trivial exercise, and without a regulatory expertise, it might be a bit difficult. And of course, we really welcome to have a regulatory agency participating in our consortia, and we have already cases in IHI where we do have regulatory agency participating as a full beneficiary in a consortium or an advisory role in the advisory board. But that doesn't exclude the fact that they might need to think already of what could be the way of interacting during the project with the regulators. And the regulators have, both at national level, at European level, have developed some services in order to support research. So this is really something that could be really used in the context of a project in order to get the best of their advice as well on how the research is going. That could help as well to redirect some of the work within the consortium. So that again is really important, because this is really the way to ensure that there is a translation of the expected outcomes to concrete application, and therefore maximizing the regulatory impact. So that's a nutshell some of the things. But of course, you may say, well, I won't remember, I won't know exactly how to do it. So we have developed a guidance, again, based on the experience, that there is a link here that can help you as well to understand a little bit better what I was talking and just giving us a hint for building your proposal. Another opportunity, and I'm pleased to already announce that we wanted to link it with this event. We will have a webinar on the 10th of December at 2 p.m. on maximizing regulatory impact. And we will be very lucky to have a number of representatives from the European Medicine Agency to talk about regulatory science, how you can interact with them, how they can help you in the project development, as well as the experience of some of the learnings from some of our projects who have been really successful or less successful, but in maximizing their impact. So that I will invite you to sign in. More information will come very soon on the website, but the registration is already open. And I think I will stop here for the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathalie. And if we can give them a round of applause for their opening interventions. I saw some people. I saw people ready to clap there. So just a reminder, all the slides that you've seen, including the one with all the links from Nathalie, will be on our website, so don't panic, it's there. And again, I know that Nathalie has just told you to read more documents on top of the ones Hugh told you to read this morning, but this is guidance for you. I mean, as she said, we do want our projects to have impact. It's not enough to do excellent science. It has to get out there into the healthcare systems, into the companies, and of course, ultimately to patients. And that will only happen if we get these regulatory approvals. So it's really important. Just a reminder, we are going to be taking questions from the audience. So in a moment when I open up the floor, you can either raise your hand if you're in the room, or if you're online, or if you're in the room and you just don't want to talk in public, you can put it in Slido. The QR code is there on the screen. And if you don't want to use the QR code, you can go to Slido, and the code is, or the hashtag is IHI 2025. I'm going to start with a question, though, for Gianpietro. So you talked a lot about the life sciences strategy, which is really referenced throughout the cortex, but obviously we also have things like the European Health Data Space, which is a really key piece of legislation. The Draghi and Letter reports really highlighted how key it is to competitiveness, which is another big buzzword for us now. So IMI and IHI projects are already contributing to making the EHDS a reality. How can future IHI projects build on this work, in your view?
Yeah, thank you. I think some responses were already given by colleagues. Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that the EHDS regulation came into force this year in March, and of course, it's not becoming a reality overnight. So this is a process. We see now more and more member states have different paces in putting that into practice. We see now, I don't know how many member states have now provided access to electronic health records to citizens. So I'm very pleased to see that, for instance, in Belgium, because I'm living here, so it's great to have this access and to manage this access. So this is an important element for the next stage, the secondary use of health data for research, innovation, but also, as you pointed out, for policy making or regulatory sciences or regulatory decision making. So I think this is a great opportunity for us all to use this data and go a step further in developing innovation quicker and more to the point, more to what patients need, more personalized, more efficient also. I think it's also with the development now of all these different AI tools, I think there is no fantasy that can stop somehow thinking about how much innovation can come in the next years based on this set of data, and then its combination also with other data like environmental data or data about, let's say, lifestyle aspects or whatever, social sciences data. So I think there's a huge wealth of potential in that, which brings me to the third point, I think, which is important not only for IHI, but more generally for health systems and health innovation, for health industry, is to rethink or also reshape the way healthcare is or health systems are designed, or health services are designed, or health technologies are integrated, or the healthcare delivery is integrated. And I see there also a huge potential to change the shape. But your question was about how can existing IMI and IHI investments be made, let's say, used by today's consortia or future consortia. And you mentioned the Eden project, which I think is really an excellent example of how, let's say, an IHI-funded project stepped the way towards harmonization of data sets and making it possible to work with data sets in a harmonized way. The other one that I think I saw also as a poster outside, which is an IHI-funded project, is IDERA, which also goes into the area of federating of databases and making it possible to get access to this data on an, as far as no more disease-specific approach. But I think these are, let's say, the infrastructures or the platforms that today's IHI applicants could look at and integrate in their research approach. I would also make a plea to look at the research infrastructures that we are funding at the European level. For instance, Elixir, that probably most of you know, which is an important, let's say, reference and access point for data, health data, life sciences data. Well, that's it from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was a good point as well to inviting people to look at other things, because again, if you read the core text, it does invite you to do a landscaping review to make sure that whatever you propose, you're not reinventing the wheel. Would anyone else like to come in on that point on this part of the discussion about the EHDS?
I think that what is really important is to also read what the previous calls were saying about EHDS, because there is, for example, there was one call out around intellectual property in EHDS, etc. So I think what I would like to invite you to is, beyond reading this topic text, is to also read every two-stage call that was issued so far by IHI, because it can give you a hint of what is already being funded. And in terms of data, beyond IDERA and the topic on IP in EHDS, every project actually has a data component and an EHDS component. All of them refer to that. But when looking at projects, think about what can my project do to help to better navigate and enable secondary use of data in various contexts, in particular the regulated context, because this is where I think we really need to think about data quality, what comes in, what comes out, and all of these other aspects, methodological aspects, that are really important to make sure that EHDS, it's not just a set of rules, because EHDS is not an infrastructure. It is a set of rules, but how do we make sure that this set of rules is not creating a technology logo, but is a technology enabler by enabling this secondary use of data and creating rules of engagement, practical rules of engagement where there is more trust, more collaboration, and and that we together enable that secondary use of data.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that one? Okay, we move on to another one.
Regulatory impact. Yeah. Regulatory impact, yes.
So another question, maybe we're starting now with Nathalie. So, I mean, the legislative, it's been alluded to already, the legislative and regulatory landscape has changed a lot, is still changing a lot. How can applicants address this in their proposals, especially some of the unpredictabilities? We know there are things coming down the line that maybe will be in place when the projects start.
Well, I think it's important as well to remember that we are doing science. We are not doing, so of course you have to be aware of all this evolution and the evolving, because you may support as well by testing, piloting, or new solutions that could help as well with the groundwork for implementation of future regulation or in a way for future proof of the regulatory system. But there are things as well that needs to be, of course, considered that may not be so impacted straight away in your research. Like if you are developing a biomarker, for the moment, in a sense, you need to be aware of all the different legislation that might be affecting your development, especially if you have a device integration, etc. But in a way, you need to be aware of the landscape. And one thing as well, and just to reiterate as well from the presentation of the life science strategy, what is really important as well is that, for instance, there are some new legislations like the HTA regulation, and in our science, the specific objective 5 is all things about the added value methodology, so that will definitely help with some of the discussion into this implementation of the regulation and how can we assess all the added value for all this combination or innovative health solutions in a way. So it has to be understood by the applicant that the word is very, in a way, dynamic, and understand the dynamism and the evolution, and not just think that doesn't concern me.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in on that? Maybe Darius, from your experience of being involved in research projects in the...
Yeah, so maybe just to comment that Europe's actually weakness and strength is regulation, but it's the only way for Europe to be active in the healthcare space right now and to really shape the research agenda. So what Natalie recommended, to be aware of upcoming regulations, of regulation that is being developed, is a key for a multi-year project, because we need to be aware that we are starting something, but we will end up in very different regulatory landscape and legislation that will come into life in several years from now. So this horizon scanning in terms of legislation and also planning forward is very, very important, definitely.
Magda, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think we are thinking about regulation of the life science strategy as just set of regulations, while it is much more than that. And when I'm looking at the announcements related, for example, to cardiovascular health and things like that, the policy is also about making healthcare systems ready for the innovative solutions that are coming. And I think that is also something that is very much underpinning the Call 12. It is about health systems readiness and the ability to deploy the innovative solutions when they come. After all, why are we doing science here if we don't have a market for that science later? Why do we do research and development and translational research if then finally, we cannot deploy that in primary and secondary care? And I think there is a number of projects that we see happening in IMI today, in IHI, that do support that. If I look at every project that it's looking at the patient journey, and projects like Umbrella or Imagine actually doing that, to redefining the patient journey. By the way, you would notice that I'm not representing just the pharmaceutical industry on this stage, but all sectors that are here, and we have 5 industry sectors in IHI, including vaccines, biotech, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and diagnostics. And I think it's really important to understand that what we want in Europe is to develop our products effectively, go through different evaluations effectively, and then be able to deploy them in a hospital setting, in primary care setting, etc. So if there are things that we can do to accelerate that path, to improve the doctor's journey, the patient journey, and accelerate the path to the market of all those products, well, to the market, to the healthcare, however you call it, depending on where you sit, on the public or private side, I think these are the things that would help the policies that health policies and life science strategy is today after. And so not just the legislation, but also what's written in small print or in large print in the life science strategy around health and health objectives.
Thanks, Magda. Natalie?
Yes, I think I just want to highlight something else as well, is that there are some areas that everybody faces the same challenge, wherever you are from the stakeholder perspective. And the only way to de-risk this is really working all together, including with the regulators. I'm sorry, I'm insisting on that, but I was asked for that. So I would just give an example, which was in the context of IMI, but it's definitely relevant still in the context of IHI. The safety of medicines in pregnant women. And lactating breastfeeding women. Again, that no one wanted to touch in a way. Regulators do not know exactly how to ask and to get the information. Companies are not really thrilled to do a registry that didn't work. For the patient, it's extremely important. It's a societal need to understand. So again, all that through the collaboration in a public-private partnership at the pre-competitive space, everybody could really work together in an impatient way, but scientific way, to develop solutions that now can be used by everybody in the context of this. So it's just to highlight that it's really important. It's not just the evolution, but it's really to work when the opportunity to really address the challenges that no one's want to touch it really, but that it's there and we need to address it in some extent.
Thank you.
Maybe just one more aspect. It's local implementation. What's happening at the level of member states? Because we need to be also aware that although we have the pan-EU legislation, we have European policy initiatives and programs. We need to also ensure how they are implemented and how they are put in practice at the member state level, because this is where healthcare happens. This is where it gets access to patients. And actually, we also need to ensure that it's implemented as it was intended, but also a bottom-up approach, what member states want to happen, what healthcare stakeholders in the member states want to happen in their own environment, how to translate it into the EU-wide policies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question, actually, it was one I was thinking of starting with you, Dariusz. We talk a lot about patient centricity. It's a word that occurs throughout the topic texts as well. How can we make sure that this covers all relevant patient groups, including the children? And obviously, your own disease area is one that is children are particularly affected, but also the elderly, women, and people who are often not fully included in research.
Yeah, so I would recommend triple early approach. So first, early identification of patient organizations and patient groups, and not only at the EU level, but also locally. So either through umbrella organizations reaching out to the local patient organizations, or identifying them directly through different consortium members or collaborators, simply to ensure that we have direct access to well-established patient groups, also at the very operational level. The next early would be engage early. So really engage with patient organizations from the very early concept phase, from generally the hypothesis we would like to put into research verification later, not only to tick the box that we engage patient organization, but really to start around their needs, around the concepts that are co-created with patient organizations. And it does no matter if we aim at children's population or women or whatever we would like to achieve. We need to contact with patients. That means families. So it's usually the organizations that are around certain disease areas group all patients that are somehow involved or impacted. And the last early will be collaborate early. So from the very concept phase, identification of needs, then co-creation of the project design solutions. But then it's also for the very benefit of the project, because involvement of patient organizations from the very beginning ensures patients' recruitment, patients' retention. So generally involvement of the patients throughout the project, also shaping the outcomes of the project, scaling up the project afterwards, dissemination of project results. These all are the areas that patients' involvement really benefit the researchers, but also benefit the patients in the way they expect to be benefited, so to really achieve the outcome that patients expect.
Can I add something to that? And dedicate enough money for them. Because I think there is a perception out there in the world that, you're very welcome, that for patients is typical, a little bit below 10%, up to 10%. So I just want to say to every patient group and organization sitting in this room and outside, that is not correct. So if somebody tells you that, that is not correct. And to colleagues who are actually leading the consortia, please make the funding for the patient organizations commensurate with what you expect them to do in the project. Because there are sometimes very high expectations, and they do it, often pro bono, and that is one of the most frequently asked questions that I have is, are we going to get rewarded or awarded the grant that is needed to really cover the work that we are doing on Sundays and Saturdays? So please do think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda. And actually,
I would only clap and really appreciate this approach, because what I mentioned, this co-designing, the identification of the need, is a real work. So this it is an important work within the project that patients do. So they need to be somehow rewarded, especially because they sacrifice their own time, energy, and knowledge. And there's really a huge know-how capacity in patient groups.
And a little bit of a promotion. So in case you don't know where to start, go to the Paradigm website, IMI Paradigm, and you would find a full toolkit with metrics of why to engage patients and how to do it in the most effective way. And maybe that's one of the pieces that might help you to shape your next project.
Thank you, Magda. You've actually answered the next question, which is what meaningful patient involvement would look like. But indeed, you can't assume people will work for free. It's you have to give funding to that work stream and respect their expertise.
You need to get funding, but you also need to get what Darek was saying about making it meaningful and to have this conversation. By the way, diversity is not a rude word in Europe yet, so write in diversity in your project as well and engage early with all those diverse groups that you need to have on your project. And that doesn't mean only women and underserved populations and children. This is also about healthcare professionals. I'm often asked I'm challenged, why don't you go any near to the healthcare professionals, the pharmacists, the doctors, the primary care doctors? You always only go to the clinicians. Yes, because these projects actually do require clinicians, but if we want to have the impact on the patient in the end and on healthcare systems, we also need the healthcare professionals who would translate those solutions into real health services. So I think don't forget about that. It is about the patients, but it's also about the healthcare systems, the healthcare professionals who deliver those interventions in the end. And they are really heavily underrepresented in European-funded projects.
Thank you, Magda.
Yeah, maybe to add to this diversity, diversity in the project setup also addresses heterogeneity of the disease itself. So we don't only want to address the single problem by complex research project, but we really need to address all the aspects of the problem and the solution. So by addressing the heterogeneity, we immediately create diversity of different stakeholders, patient groups, groups of patients within the disease group, but also different researchers, clinicians, different players in the healthcare field. So definitely it's also for the benefit of project itself to think about this diversity and every potential aspects of the problem we are trying to solve from the very beginning.
Okay, thank you. I think we can open up the discussion to the audience now. So you have the QR code there on the screen. I have a few questions in Slido already. Again, you can also use the hashtag IHI 2025. And if you're in the room, you are also more than welcome to raise a hand. And I see two there already. So maybe the gentleman here on the end of the row. Yeah.
Okay, so the EU obviously is doing many useful things, and the regulation is one of them. But I think we also have to recognize, we heard regulation. It apparently has become a science even. I hear it regulatory science. I don't know what that is, even though I'm a scientist, but okay. I think we also have to recognize that there are also some, hopefully, unintended side effects. If you introduce GDPR and then you wonder why fewer clinical trials are done in Europe, I mean, you have the answer right there. If you introduce novel legislation for medical devices, then people prefer to bring their device to the market in the US rather than the EU. You don't have to ask why. If you say that you're going to create a single market in Europe, and you're upset, and rightly so, that Trump imposes tariffs, a recent study shows that the internal non-tariff barriers in the EU are of the order of 60 to 65%, much higher than Trump's imposing. So, I mean, and these regulations have not fallen from the sky. They're not laws of nature like gravity. We, the EU, has invented these things. So instead of now asking IHI projects to find ways to work around the regulations, why not pass regulations that actually favor the translation into applications rather than hinder them? Then we won't have to find ways around them. So smarter legislation, I think, is what, as a scientist, I would ask.
Do you want to take that, Gianpietro?
Yes, sure. I'm aware about this study about the internal tariffs, and yes, the European Union has a certain history of starting with member states and evolving in more integration, and we are still on the way to that. So I fully agree what you mentioned, and we are looking into that as part of the strategy that we have developed, and there are certainly ways to make it slimmer, without ignoring the fact that as a public policymaker, that you need to look and ensure that citizens are safe and that what they receive as healthcare service is also effective. And these are the two dimensions that we need to keep in mind. And while also ensuring that, of course, in the global race for markets, for access, for selling, we need to also make sure that this is not, that we are not sidelined. So we are working on that. Thank you.
I think you're right. We need to have bolder, faster, smarter regulation in Europe, and a lot of these pieces have been open. However, at the same time, I didn't say that we need to work around the legislation. I said we need to help with better implementation, and sometimes even the best legislation can turn sour if it is implemented in the wrong way. I think this is where we can show the way and to help, not to go around, but rather to support the most innovation-friendly implementation. So while I completely wholeheartedly agree with you that the legislation is sometimes our worst enemy, at the same time it's also our protection in many spaces. And if we apply it smartly, it is both protection and enabler. And I think that that's what we can do here in IHI. Well, on the principle, I can't agree more.
Thank you. Natalie, would you just like to briefly explain what is regulatory science? That was part of the question.
So maybe first register to your webinar on the 10th of December, but it's really, because all that will be explained fully. But no, it's again more like the research that is needed around the methodology in order to improve the development and the decision on the evaluation of medicines. And we know that we are missing some of this tool that needs to be developed from the research perspective. If I give the example of digital endpoint or endpoint in a certain disease, there are certain diseases we don't know how to do the clinical trial because we don't have the endpoint for the phase 3 trial, for instance. So that is really where things can be missing, developed, in order to make sure that we will have at a certain moment helping the development of solution in that disease space. So that's the science around developing methodologies that can be used in the context of these medicines or device development and evaluation. And standards, yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. The gentleman in red there also had it. Can I ask you to stand up when you ask your question as well, please? Thank you.
Marcin Balcerzyk, Bioraba Health Research Institute in Spain. I have a question to Natalie. You concentrated mostly on EMA, which is drug regulatory part. Could you comment more on medical devices area where you have, for example, 2A or 2B class devices? And how can this can go into, for example, in the project? Can I pass the funding not to EMA, of course, but as a notified body, like public-private in Spine 0138, or like a consultancy agency to prepare the documentation? But generally on medical devices, please.
So it's clear that on the medical device sides, we don't have one single regulator. So there is the National Competence Authority, the notified body. So first of all, you can still have the interaction during the project with them in order to the National Competence Authorities to understand as well what your development or your research is about. But then, of course, you can definitely have notified bodies as part of the consortium. And we do have some project under IHI where notified body will be a part of the as beneficiaries, and then you can have as well. And I was saying regulatory agencies, and it's not only on the EMA side. We do have national regulatory agency, and national regulatory agencies are not only for medicines, they are for devices as well. So there are many opportunities. And there is more and more as well this kind of interaction. So definitely it's possible to have, as part of your consortium or an advisory board, to have this aspect. I just give an example of an early IHI project, which is on early feasibility studies for medical devices, where you don't have that in the consortium itself. Here, you don't have any representative from the agencies or notified body, but they are part of the advisory role. They are really involved. But we do have some other projects where they are part.
You see the conflict of interest if the notified body is there. I mean, it is about 100 to 200,000 euro minimum for the process, and then they are part of something that they will need to certify.
Usually, when at least our experience is when notified body are in, they are with the association, the team, team NB. So it's the association of the notified body.
As a member of the project?
Yes. But again, one thing that may be important to flag, it's up to them to decide if they want to be part. And some of the agencies have defined some rules when you can be part of a project, when you cannot be part of the project because of conflict of interest. And sometimes it's separate. You know, that in agency they have some defined rules in order to have separate those who are part of the project as science and those who will be part from the more evaluation side.
Another way of addressing that, and it happened in several projects before, is that colleagues who need regulatory expertise would actually go for that regulatory expertise outside of regulatory agencies, but go really to the regulatory experts, be it on the academic side or ex-regulators or consultancies. So that is also possible, and we saw them extremely helpful, especially in preparing the dossier for qualifications, for regulatory acceptance. I think this is what you are talking about. The point of this is costly. Yes, it is. But then let's remember that the value of them being involved in the projects goes far beyond the commercial value of the service they provide. So getting those consultants on board in the project offers them another value that helps also to negotiate how much they are getting, and they are not necessarily paid by you then, right? So I think it's important to look outside of the usual box, not just the authority, but also who are the other people who can bring that expertise that you need and that excellence that you need on the project.
And I think if I can maybe, because you're right in some of the, so again, doesn't necessarily have to be part of the consortium, and even if they are part of the consortium, it doesn't prevent that there is a need to have some interaction anyway. And this interaction sometimes may be for free. There are some support for free. There are some support with cost. And this is why we said that it's important to have all that factor in from the start, a regulatory strategy and interaction plan, because it takes resources and it can take times, but as well you need to have that plan, because some of them indeed won't be for free, and therefore it's a pity when the project has not planned that, and at the moment to go to have this interaction does not have the funding necessary, which maybe not that large compared to the rest of the project, but just that funding in order to have this interaction. So it's important to have that plan. And this is why we said that having a plan from the start, an iterative, it's because all that needs to be thought of from the start, not really at the end.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from Slido now, because there are people online as well following this event. And it's actually a bit in the similar topic area. Does IHI have feedback from projects on the efficiency and value of the different regulatory pathways in place at the EMA to support them in their research?
Yes, we do. So obviously there are some different services offered. So overall, all of our projects that have gone had a positive feedback and positive experience, and it has been extremely useful for the project. Then there are the different services, because some are more in the early phase, as briefing meetings, or as the innovation task force, where it's more to have already some interaction and already have some feeling on things that may not have been thought in the project. But then you do have the more formal interaction, which would be in the form of advice, qualification advice. And we had in the history of IHI already 3 projects that have reached the qualification of the methodology that they have developed. So this is already a very good sign. And we have a number that didn't reach that qualification, but receive a letter of support. And that we have several, meaning that the methodology, the tool that they have developed is not yet at the level that can be embedded in or fully accepted, but it's already a sign that it's very encouraging and it's going in the right path. So that's very important as well. So yes, we do have a lot of positive experience. And again, on the 10, we will hear some of them of this experience.
Great.
I know that we are spending a lot of time on these regulatory interactions, but they are extremely important. The qualification, standardization, regulatory acceptance of whatever is being done in projects where it has a regulatory relevance, it's a very important tool of de-risking, especially new areas of work. So don't underestimate it. I know that we are spending a lot of time today on this podium to talk about it, but whether it's contacts with notified bodies, medicines regulators, data regulators, AI regulators, whatever standardization or acceptance you need, think about it up front. thinking also that some of that might happen after your project ended, but still you need to prepare the way during your project. So these interactions and the regulatory strategy plan and the regulatory science perspective need to be brought on board from day one if something has a regulatory relevance.
Great, thank you. Going to go for the room. I hear there's a question at the back there. If you would like to stand up and ask your question, please.
Hello, it is Burcu from Philips. Thank you a lot for dissecting all the different aspects of the IHI project so far. And I'm just wondering about the post-project stewardship. So far, we are covering all these points related to the project. However, after 5 years, this is a more enormous opportunity given to us to make the impact. But after that, how are you handling the post-project processes? And do you have already plans historically, anything applied in IMI, IHI, and so on?
Okay, I can start, but I don't have a response to your question, to be frank with you. So there were several tools that we've been using in the past. First, I think we are talking about deployment of results in practice, be it medical practice or regulatory practice or research practice. I think, again, when you know that this is an impact that you aim for, you need to prepare for that during your project. So to engage with all those end users so that you can do the deployment later. Then there is another point where your results are not yet fully mature and that require another round of funding or some support. We've done in the past some top-up funding instruments in IMI. It worked fine, but it can just help a few. It can't help everybody. So I would say there is not an ideal instrument, and I would actually turn to you because we've been always saying that the European Union needs 2 tools, one tool for generating the innovation and another tool for deployment when it is generated. So I would say today we probably need another funding tool and another instrument to help to steward the new innovation into the healthcare systems. There was one partnership that was trying to do that. I think the healthcare systems modernization, but again, it doesn't go far enough in terms of funding and supporting financially these activities.
Gianpietro, would you like to respond?
Maybe I say something on that. I cannot say too much because we made a proposal for 2 things. We made a proposal for the next framework program for research, the 10th, which will also be called Horizon Europe. So for the period 2028 to 2034, not only you, but also me. So I'm calling it FP10 for now. So the other thing is the European Competitiveness Fund, which will have 4 policy windows. One will be on health, biotech, bioeconomy, and agriculture, so very broad. But actually the idea is really to have this window as seen as a kind of, let's say, a window where a kind of value chain approach can be designed on specific challenges, needs, and opportunities. So driving research innovations through the innovation journey just to the deployment and uptake. And that's actually what you are looking for. And this will actually, the European Competitiveness Fund proposal integrates what several other programs which were funded under the current financial period, including the health program. So actually, the health program will be implemented through this policy window of the Competitiveness Fund, and will have the role to support the uptake of research innovation into deployment and make it available to patients and people. So that's actually the response. But more I cannot tell you, apart from what is written in the proposal. It's now for consultation or with the council and the parliament. So they have to make up their opinion, and so the interinstitutional decision-making has been launched, and it will take some time to see in what direction this will go, or what council and parliament would like to see in addition or differently or more specified and so on. Thank you.
Darius, you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe to add concrete examples of the projects that really different approach to their sustainability, to afterlife after IHI funding is different because of a different nature of the disease area they aim at. And my foundation was part of the EU Pearl project that derived the toolkits and protocols for adaptive clinical trial designs. And here we had a work stream dedicated to severe depression, which really went very well and very quickly the team found the funding from the private foundation to develop the project, implement the project and develop it further. While we can see that in the rare disease area, it's not that straightforward. Here, we need clear proof of concept, probably publicly funded or like the more philanthropic funding for the proof of concept to really showcase the market readiness and to attract the industry to engage in this platform. So depending on disease area and also the market size, probably the results are also different. So we need this individualistic approach as well, not necessarily one size fits all approach.
Natalie?
Maybe just a point. Obviously, IHI projects are still at the beginning, so we are not yet facing this issue, but we can expect that we will have, as we have seen in some of the IMI projects. What is important to remember is that, so first of all, already from the proposal stage, that in the proposal you need to have the pathway to impact and already identified all your end user in a way. So that needs to be again embedded to some extent from the start of the project. But of course, every project is unique, and you need to understand what are the outputs, the results, where would it fit. And some of them, we had the chance that for some project that, let's say, there was still a need to generate some data in order to continue, but the research was so important that the consortium and the industry continued to help afterwards in order to generate this data. So that can be a way that has been found. It won't work for all of them. Some have been able, but to create foundation or non-profit organization from the starts. But again, sometimes you need to have the expertise that is beyond what is usual in a consortium, because it's nearly like business developer or business developers or having this kind of thing. So there is not one solution. We are all aware of the problem. We try to share the information between the projects who have been successful that can give some ideas for other projects. We have the deployment or scale-up brochure that can help as well consortia to think from the start. But we are aware that there is no a single solution, and that for the moment we don't have the means to continue funding for those projects that have that are on the path to be really successful. That we are lacking for the moment.
And funding is not always the condition of a successful deployment. So I think that's also important to remember. The brochure you are alluding to, which is called the Field Manual for Upscaling and Deployment of Results, generated in pre-competitive consortia, contains some checklists of things. If you have an infrastructure, knowledge, or a physical asset, and depending on where you want to use it, what are the questions that you need to ask yourself? And I know that it looks very theoretically, but it really has both canvas and questions and checklists that help at least thinking of who is my end user and what do I need to plan as activity going in that direction. A little bit of a metro map. There is also a video that helps doing that. Why am I talking about it? Is because everybody thinks sustainability, money, foundation. I saw so many foundations created out of IMI and potentially IHI projects that in the end, who is going to pay for these foundations? It's just creating a lot of fragmentation. Think also, if I need to create a new infrastructure, is there already an infrastructure that is doing that? Can I bring them in? If there is a European infrastructure, biobanks, Elixir, clinical trials, a platform that exists, why don't you bring them in? There are new platforms that are being created for digital endpoints and measures, qualification. Why not to bring them in? So look around you. Don't create something from scratch because it's not invented here. Really important because that might help also consolidating and creating critical mass. And I think that could help you to also get faster to the research work. Because if you don't need to create a new infrastructure from scratch, that time would be used to already generate the results.
Thanks, Magda. I will add that field manual is on the IHI website. There's a whole section called Resources for Projects. There's a section on exploitation, and you will find the field manual there and the video. So go there, have a look at it, because as we've said, and we've said for many things here, the key for all of these is to start early. Start engaging patients early, think about sustainability early, think about the regulatory plans early. You can never start too early on these things. I'm going to I think we have time for a couple more questions. Magda has, there's a question there. Yes, I can see. Can someone go to that person, and if you can stand up when you ask your question, please?
Yeah. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Gustavo Hernandez. I'm speaking on behalf of the Technical University of Madrid, UPM. We are involved in an IHI project that is currently running, that is the Cynthia project, where we are actually the leaders of the development of a large-scale validated federated learning platform. So if you have some of the ideas, I will be glad to share and to see how we can collaborate. After this advertisement, then my small reflection and at the same question. We are facing a problem, and it's the data sharing agreements, the joint controlling agreements, all the stuff that we need to be sure that we are doing all the process, following good clinical practices, GDPR, etc. The problem is that the estimation is always lower. So it's shorter than it should be. So a reflection, and at the end, as well, a question for you. How you envisage that we could speed up that process? Because it's a real problem, not only for the IHI, but for all the projects.
So I think the data sharing playbook is offering some responses to that. We have looked, and again, the data sharing playbook has been generated or created by a consortium, public-private consortium, so that we can check what were the stumbling blocks in companies and what were the stumbling blocks in universities and how the bridges can be created. It has a lot of tools, template agreements, etc., to actually accelerate all of that. However, you can't accelerate what you can't accelerate, and sometimes the interactions with the authorities, the authorizations, or even legal reviews by both universities and companies are taking longer time. Our experience is that when you use the templates and the workflows that are described in that playbook, it just goes faster. So I would propose that you try that, and if that doesn't work, come back to us. We learn lessons and we adapt the playbook.
Thank you, Magda. We've just got time. I think I'm going to take one more question here from Slido, which is for Darius. Patient research literacy is a key barrier. How can patient organizations help with recruitment and retention in clinical research?
Yes, so generally patient organizations need also to learn, and patients need to be well trained in both regulatory landscape, but also the very practical way of clinical trial operations. So patient recruitment and retention is not only direct contact to patients the organizations have in the country, but the set of communication that needs to be delivered to patients, so the educational set that will allow patients to understand the goals, the objectives of the study itself, but also the benefits it provides to them, their families. this is the only way, of course, the longest and the hardest, but the only way that we can really assure that the retention is maximal, that patients understand well what they are signing for, and also the potential benefit of being there, but also all the threats, all the aspects of the study that is designed. So I would simply advise education, but usually reach out if you're a local patient organization, reach out to umbrella organizations, to international organizations that very often develop educational sets for the patients, help to translate them, and help also to add cultural context to educational materials, that then the educational materials can be understood in the very local context. So the collaboration between local organization and international umbrella organizations is also the key here.
Thank you. And I will just do a little shout out as well to UPATI, which started life as an IMI project and has a wealth of information. I mean, it's obviously designed for patients, but it's brilliant for absolutely anyone. We have come to the end of the panel, so I would like to say thank you very much to Gianpietro, Magda, Dariusz, and Natalie for your interventions. I hope that they've given you lots of food for thought as you go away and start preparing your proposals, and I hope you have a better idea now of the bigger picture that we operate in. This really will help you. So we will be back in half an hour at 4:15. And meantime, do take the time, stroll around, meet the posters, meet the other pitchers. Don't forget there are posters upstairs. It's where all the cool people are. Go and visit them. And we will see you back here for the last pitching session at 4:15. Thank you, everyone.